Hi, everybody that's slowly joining. It's just 4 o'clock, and we're going to wait a couple minutes for people to come in. We have a large group today. I'm Victoria Alexander, and I'll introduce myself and my colleagues as soon as more people join. But just going to open the chat here so people know where it is. This is the chat. Might do it again when more people join. And so people know how to leave questions in the middle of the presentation. Everybody's going to stay on mute until the end where we will have open conversation. But you can always put your questions in the chat. So if it's relevant at the time of whatever we're speaking at, we can speak to that question specifically at that time. And yeah, just going to wait here for a little bit. Is there let's close my notes for this. So just as we're waiting for people, I'm going to ask while we get started, it'd be wonderful to have a sense of where people are in their process. So if you are joining from, where are you listening from? If you want to tell us where you're coming from, put that in the chat. Please let us know where you are in the buying process. For instance, do you already have a mortgage commitment letter? That would be way down low. Do you already have a pre-approval letter? Are you looking in Brooklyn? Are you looking in New Jersey? Both Rashidah and Lisa do mortgages in New Jersey. I do not. And are you looking for a multifamily, a condo, a co-op, new construction, a brownstone? And do you have your whole team assembled? And your team would be your mortgage broker, your lawyer, and your real estate agent. So if you have answers to any of those questions, you can go ahead and leave them in the chat, and go ahead throughout the class to just leave questions there, and we will get to them. And my associate Samantha's on the call today so that she can handle any questions or concerns, and she'll put a couple links and things in there, some resources. And at the end of this, I send out an email with our home buying guide and some other resources. We have a closing cost calculator that is really helpful. And here's my presentation. I'm just going to wait because we had a large RSVP group and want to give people, and I sent out a reminder, but I'm wondering if 4 o'clock maybe is too early on a day for people to stop working. I'm going to wait till 4:05. I always wait till 5 after to get started. Does anybody want to talk about their buying process, where they are in the buying process directly? You can unmute yourself or in the chat. Nope, not yet. Everybody's still shy. Nope, almost. Okay, it's 4:05. Hi, everybody, and welcome to Buying into Brooklyn. My name is Victoria Alexander, and I am the owner of Realty Collective, a real estate brokerage here in Brooklyn that I started 15 years ago. And I believe that real estate can be done differently, and that I started the company to sort of defy the stereotypes associated with real estate brokers. And I don't need to name what those stereotypes are because I think we're all very aware of them. And I want to introduce my two colleagues, Lisa and Rashidah, and I will let them speak about their expertise and what they do. Rashidah, you want to go first?
Hi, everyone. Nice to have another monthly seminar on buying in Brooklyn and the real estate process. My name is Rashidah Siddiqui. I'm a partner in a real estate and wills and estate trust planning firm. Primarily what I do is real estate. I've been in practice for the last 18 years. So been through ups and downs in the market. Have a partner, John Serpico, and I have another attorney and our small staff. Represent clients that are both buying, selling in the real estate market, also represent banks, and I'm also licensed in New Jersey. So whether it's New York or New Jersey, I can represent clients in both those in their transactions, whether it's a buyer or a sale for your first time. I represent a lot of first-time buyers, and I always liken the experience to a roller coaster. And as your attorney, I'm here to hopefully get you along that process to make it as an enjoyable ride as it can be in real estate, and as not as overwhelming as it can be, especially when you're looking during this time and a lot of moving parts. So I look forward to speaking and sharing some knowledge on the process.
I use the same analogy of the roller coaster. I say it's an emotional roller coaster.
It is.
Lisa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa. I'm a loan officer at CrossCountry Mortgage. We are a private lending bank, so that means we work like the big banks, but all we do is mortgages. I'm licensed throughout the country, so I can do deals in New York. I can do deals in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, sort of you name it, West Coast as well. I can do it. We specialize in really like all types of residential mortgages from, single family homes and co-ops to condos or multifamilies. So there's a lot of diversity out there in terms of our products. And yeah, I love working with first-time home buyers. It's sort of, gives me like a happy feeling inside to help someone buy their first house. And yes, I say the same thing, that this is going to be a wild ride, but me and my team really work to get you through it as quickly and as painlessly as possible. So happy to answer your questions and to see how I can help you out.
Great. Thanks, ladies. I like when you introduce yourselves because you do such a good job at it. So I'm just going to remind everybody about the chat, that you can put any questions you have there. We're going to go through a little small presentation, but feel free to ask any questions in the chat. And if it's relevant at the moment, we can get to them, or, everybody can unmute themselves at the end and we can have, a very open conversation about your buying process and experience and what you specifically need help with. And again, so I'm Victoria Alexander. I'm from, someone already asked, can you talk about the public school system? What about the public school system? So I'm Victoria Alexander. I'm the owner of Realty Collective. I've been doing this class for almost the 15 years since I started the company. Rashidah and I used to do it in person back at Brooklyn Brewery when we could all meet in real life. And I started working with Lisa a couple years ago, and now we've had a couple deals under our belt. And it's been great for the three of us women to work together and create a really strong team, because that way we can service and help our clients to the best when we all work together. So, and Rashidah was actually my lawyer 10 years ago when I bought my house. And I have a crazy roller coaster story about how I purchased my home as well, if anybody wants to have a firsthand experience analogy. So I'm just going to share my screen to go through our little PowerPoint. And here we go. Picking this up and get started. Here we go. I had to hit view full screen and this is in the way. How do we do that? Okay, well, I'm going to scroll down. Oh, there we are. That's us. Okay, I just want to hide this so I can hit view full screen, and I can't do it. There we go. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see now. So why buy? There's lots of reasons to buy, especially right now. It's a buyer's market, in my opinion. The rent has always been too high here. Even with rents coming down, it's a great position to leverage yourself and actually get out of the rental market and become a homeowner with some stability and controlling your expenses. Having your own design, making a space your own, long-term investment, equity, and the interest rates are just really at like all-time historic record-breaking lows. So buying right now, if you have a stable job and stable income and feel committed to New York City and Brooklyn, or any place, because maybe you want to buy in New Jersey or somewhere else, if you feel like you are committed to your decision, then I would encourage you to at least start figuring out if this is the right pathways to go. Because getting out of the rental market is one of the best things you can do to build equity in your life. Next slide. So we have something called the rent versus buy matrix that Samantha's going to drop in the chat a link to it, where you can put in your rent and put in some other parameters and figure out if buying versus renting is right for you. If you're in a rent stabilized apartment, maybe not the best idea to leave that situation. If you are thinking about a move to California or another state, maybe buying something right now might not be the best decision. I would say owning and holding something for 5 years is the time frame that you need to keep in mind when thinking about purchasing a property. So first thing you do before you go on Zillow, can anybody want to put in the chat, like, who's already stalking listings on Zillow and StreetEasy? Where are you looking? Are you looking on those platforms, or is there something that we don't know about? People still using Trulia? That's a place, right? That people still look for real estate. So the first thing you do before you start going and looking at property is assemble your team. You need to talk to Lisa and make sure that you understand your monthly expenses as well as what you can actually afford as a purchase price and what a bank's going to loan you. You can't walk into a property, fall in love with it, and not have a pre-approval letter. You're, one, not going to get that property because somebody's going to scoop in behind you. And two, you're going to be disappointed if you find out you actually can't afford what the property that you fell in love with. So understanding your spending power and your buying power, and understanding and having all your paperwork together and who's on your team is the first step to purchasing a property. Then you need other people besides your attorney, your mortgage broker, and your real estate broker. You might need a contractor. You'll probably definitely need an inspector, and you'll need time. If your lease is up in 30 days, you are cutting it probably so close that you're not going to make this transaction happen. And you will have to figure out, based on your landlord and other situations, another exit strategy out of that. And that you don't want to feel the time pressure when purchasing. You really just want to make sure you're making and feel confident in your decisions. Okay, am I missing any questions? The one about the schools. Financing. So I'm going to let Lisa just talk about the whole financing part.
Sure. So like Victoria mentioned, so you're starting to look around. The very first question you probably have, along with what do you want, is what can you afford? And that's why one of the first people you should talk to is a mortgage professional, for two pretty clear reasons. First, they're going to tell you how much you can get pre-approved for a loan. And that might be less than you're thinking, but that might be more. And if it's less, you don't want to fall in love with something that you're not going to get a mortgage for. And if it's more, then, maybe you can, look at that property that you think is out of reach, but maybe is not. So when you have an initial conversation with a mortgage professional, it's like a pretty personal, process. I'm going to talk to you a lot about sort of what you're looking for, what, are you going to be in this property forever? Is this going to be your first home, like a starter apartment, stuff like that. All of these questions help me understand, what's the right product for you. It might be like a conventional 30-year product. It might be an FHA product, which allows you to put, only 3.5% down. It might be, what we call a conventional with a private mortgage insurance. So in that case, you're putting less than 20% down, which is the standard. You're putting more like 10% down, and you're paying PMI on top of that. So these are like all options that you're going to talk through with someone so you can get an idea as to what a mortgage might look like. Then your professional is going to run your credit, and they're going to take some documents from you to sort of confirm the numbers that we talked about. Then you get what's called a pre-approval letter. that pre-approval letter is really a working draft, okay? It's something that then you are going to work with Victoria and start looking at places. And as you see places, you might say, you know what, Lisa, like we were initially thinking of a loan of like 400, but I'm sort of falling in love with places that we would need more. What would those numbers look like? So it really is a discussion until you find the right property. When you find the right property, then we sort of will move forward into sort of getting you to underwriting in a second. But a few things I want to talk about now. So with COVID, some things have changed. If you're self-employed, you can still get a mortgage. There are a few hoops you have to jump through. And it's just really important that you, if you're self-employed and you want to buy something, you should be talking to someone sooner rather than later in terms of looking at your tax returns and looking at what income we can use. General rule, if you're self-employed, is if you pay taxes on it, you can use it to qualify. If you don't pay taxes on it, you can't use the income to qualify. So that's just something to keep in mind. I always tell my self-employed borrowers to talk to me and show me a draft of your tax returns before you file. Because if you want to buy something in that year, we might tweak the numbers a little bit on your tax return just to help you have that buying power. Also, with COVID, we are seeing appraisal waivers, which is pretty cool, or exterior appraisals. These are sort of things as we go through the process, you'll see is sort of a surprise benefit of COVID is that some of the conditions have actually become a little bit easier because of social distancing and the like. Last thing I just want to say is that like rates, like Victoria mentioned, are really fantastic. And they have been fantastic for like almost a year now. I mean, I can't believe it. So what that means for you is that if last year you were pre-approved at 400, you very well might be pre-approved at 500 now because you can just borrow more money because the interest rates are lower. So it's definitely a good time to see, you know, what you can buy just because, you know, the rates right now are just fantastic.
Is anybody on the call here self-employed? You can answer in the chat. Because I think that that's been some of the challenges. A couple of the clients, Lisa and you and I have been working with, is that they definitely, you know, have, just as a business owner myself, you know, you like to put all your expenses and everything on your tax return, so you're paying less at the end. But in the long run, if you're trying to buy, that doesn't always look so great. So talking to somebody before you're filing for 2020, you know, I think would be, so like Lisa has been really great coaching some of my clients about what that needs to look like for them.
And again, that doesn't mean that you have to, you know, it's not forever. It's just for when you file this year to get that income up so that we could qualify you.
Right.
So it's just something that you sort of have a conversation with me and your tax accountant, and we figure out like the best plan of attack. Someone's asking, what is the average DTI ratio if it's a second home? So if it's a second home, actually, as long as it's truly a second home and it's not an investment property, the criteria is pretty much the same. So, you know, the issue is just going to be showing actually like reserves. But in the DTI, and for those of you who don't know, that's the debt to income ratio. So that's taking your income, taking what your housing payment's going to be, taking what your debt is, and then figuring out what your DTI is. So it's pretty much the same, you know, again, depending on the purchase price and the loan amount, which is typically for a conventional, I mean, it can go as high as like 48 or 49, depending on the credit score. For FHA, it is, you know, it could go that high as well. For a jumbo loan, which is like over 760-ish, it is a hard stop at 43. So that's just sort of the difference. And that's like, I think a little pretty technical, but that's sort of that's a conversation you're going to have with your mortgage professional when they run your credit and look at your income.
Someone's asking about they're always hearing about pre-approval. And versus getting fully approved. You don't get fully approved until you actually pick the property. So you want to get pre-approved so you get the bank to say how much they would loan you, and then they have to qualify the building, qualify you, did get all of your paperwork, every little strand of hair all collected correctly, and get all the building's financials, and then they're going to give you something called a mortgage commitment so that they can actually give you the loan for the property you found. So you want to get pre-approved before you start looking for a property, and then you get fully approved once you find the property. One other question is, prices are so high in Brooklyn. What is the usual minimum income level? Lisa, that's a good question.
Yeah, that's really hard to answer though. And the reason it's hard to answer is because it totally depends on, first of all, your debt. Second of all, how much you're putting down. Third of all, what kind of income we're using. Is it W-2? Is it self-employed? Is it bonus? So that's like how I talked at the beginning about it sort of being a personal conversation. Like every loan is sort of a little different. So you sort of need to talk, you need to have a conversation with me or with someone else where we really sort of dig into your specific loan application. And then, I can tell you, well, this is the kind of income we would need to see for this type of purchase price.
These are really great questions. I'm really excited about the level of questions that we're having today. Someone's asking, I'm going to scroll to the next panel, but someone's asking about how student loan factors into your debt to income ratio and your finances in general.
Yeah, so that is actually a really good question. So with student loans, again, there's a few different options. We're always going to run your credit because it really is important to see what is reporting as your student loans. Even if they're deferred, you still have to be qualified based on a payment, but that could be anywhere from the reported payment to 1% to 0.5%. So again, it sort of depends on the specific application, but 100%, if you have student loans, that's something you need to bring out if you're when you're talking to a mortgage professional. You should be saying, in terms of debt, I have student loans. This is what it's looking like, and make sure that you're up to date with your payments on your student loans.
So where do you search? So I asked this in the beginning, and some of you already wrote Zillow, Trulia, StreetEasy. I would say that you guys can search. Those are all public platforms. I think that StreetEasy is probably one of the better ones in terms of that, but Zillow bought StreetEasy. So now they're owned by the same people. And the other thing you should be aware of, and this has happened just this morning, and Rashidah, you should be getting a call from this person. They wrote to somebody on StreetEasy, thought that they were writing to the seller's broker, and ended up writing to somebody that is paying for their name to be associated with the listing on StreetEasy, and went to go see the apartment, ended up meeting this person and then seeing this apartment and realizing all this was happening, and now wants to move forward with the apartment and doesn't like the person, and called me this morning, was like, I don't know what to do. We want to work with you guys, but, and I was like, well, there's a problem here because you've already seen the property with this other person. But they're like, well, we really don't like them. And then they talk themselves sort of out of this apartment because they have such a bad taste in their mouth from the situation. And we're going to go see other things. But you should be very clear about who represents who here. When we show up to look at the apartment, the broker that is there, it represents the seller. Their fiduciary responsibility is to the seller, and their best interest is looking out for the seller to get them the most amount of money, the most deal, or fulfill whatever goals that they're trying to reach for their seller. But their job is to work for that person. You need someone on your court, and usually that's me or another buyer's broker, helping you navigate this situation and advocating for you. I've done this a gazillion times. I know the tricks of the trade. I'm going to avoid some, traps that you could easily fall into. Nothing to be scared of, but you just need guided professional expertise if you've never done this before. I know a ton of people, once you bought your first house, now you understand how the whole process works. Maybe you don't need me for the second or third one, but definitely for first-time home buyers, you want to be aware and be of what's going on and have somebody there that can guide you through the process. And that is what the new real estate broker sort of roles are, is that I'm there as a coach for you to figure out, how to go out and ride the roller coaster, basically. So those are all great places. And you also, from these sites, don't have access to the MLS. And that's one things brokers still have access to that the public doesn't, is access to one database that has all the listings. You're looking at all these different sites, and it just depends if the listings are being syndicated to those sites. So finding your dream home. I talk a lot about building typology. If somebody wants a full service building, you probably are not going to be looking in Bushwick. If you want to have pre-war details, you're probably not working in Williamsburg. If you want to have a co-op, you're also probably not looking in Williamsburg. So understanding what your wish list and matching it with the location and the building typology that's available in those neighborhoods is really important. So if you want, is there anybody that is looking for a co-op right now? And do you know how to put together a co-op application and pass a co-op board? It's actually very, very intense process. And I encourage you to think about some of the restrictions. Co-ops have rental restrictions that condos and real property doesn't have, because co-ops, you're buying shares. You're not buying actual property. You're buying shares in a corporation. The building is the corporation. So finding your dream home, narrowing down what that dream home looks like. Is it a brownstone? Is it a multifamily? Is it a co-op or a condo? And those are the types of properties that are in Brooklyn. And if you might be looking in New Jersey and finding, looking for a single family home and understanding probably what we brought up earlier, the school districts. So now that you've narrowed it down, and we've narrowed it down to like 2 or 3 neighborhoods that we're gonna look for your apartment in, we're going to think about making an offer. I have people, before we even start looking, is getting a cover letter together, getting their pre-approval letter together, and getting something called a submit offer form together, where they're outlining all their financials on one piece of paper. Then, depending on what's going on, and right now we're very much in a buyer's market, but certain type of properties have a lot of competition because there's so many buyers right now. But if you're looking for something that not everybody is looking for, you have a lot of leverage. If you don't want outdoor space, you have leverage right now. If you don't need a washer dryer in your apartment, you have a lot of leverage right now. There's a lot of new construction inventory sitting on the market out in Bushwick and on the edge of Bed-Stuy. You have some leverage because there's just so much inventory and not enough buyers to absorb that inventory. But there's other places like in Cobble Hill, Carl Gardens, duplex 2 bedrooms with outdoor space are, 10-person bidding war. Very, very challenging time to be a buyer if you don't know how to navigate that situation. So Rashidah, making an offer and negotiating the terms. You want to talk about terms in general and then maybe some COVID things that have come up?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you talked about like the buyer's market and the sellers, and
it's crazy.
Also just getting your team together, because right now it is pretty much as soon as you get your offer, they expect you to be in contract right away. Had a situation this week where the buyers had switched attorneys. They had an attorney initially. They switched attorneys, and then another buyer swooped in with a better offer, and the seller ended up going with them. Just because the time for them to find another attorney, figure it out, the property is still on the market, and it became a situation where this was just a hot property, and that second buyer came in and went into contract in 2 days and was able to, go forward with that. But
you were the seller's attorney? Sorry.
I was a seller's attorney.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where was the apartment?
It was in, like Cobble, like downtown Brooklyn, Cobble Heights, around that area. Yeah. It's a small co-op building. So very, 5-6 units. So it really depends on the buildings and the properties. So just a little bit about negotiating the offers and the terms. I tell clients, until the contract is fully signed by both parties, you're not in contract in New York. In New Jersey, it's a little bit different, but in New York, the buyer has to sign the contract first, give the down payment, and then the seller signs it. Between that time, the seller can move on, the buyer can move on, you're not in contract. So terms, even though your offer is accepted, some of the terms can be negotiated. One of the things that happens a lot is an inspection. you put in your offer, but you haven't done an inspection on the property, whether it's a house, a condo, not so much for co-ops, but I do see people doing inspections on co-ops depending on the size of the building. You do your inspection and you find out there's, structural issues, or the windows or the appliances aren't working, or there's issues with the heating system. So now you're negotiating the terms again, which have to be incorporated in that contract from your initial offer. And those terms, your attorney is also in conjunction with the realtors, getting to make sure that you have those new terms put into the contract of sale.
Are people, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
are people still doing like waiving financing contingencies and waiving appraisal contingencies and appraisal and then more?
Yeah, so we're not seeing so much of a waiver of the appraisal contingency. What we're seeing now is more of negotiating the maximum the appraisal can come in at, because you have these bidding wars. Some people can say, okay, even if it came in lower than my price because I overbid by 20,000, I can come up with that extra money. So we'll put a cap on the appraisal. We still want the option to cancel if it doesn't appraise for a certain amount. So we've been seeing more of those kind of negotiated terms where you put a cap on the appraisal, where they can either come up with the difference or really negotiate slightly lower down than what the price was initially, especially where there's been an overbidding. Haven't seen it. We've seen a couple of issues with appraisals coming in lower. So it's been quite actually more than normal that I've been seeing it lately. And that's been negotiated after you're in contract regarding that appraisal, because part of your contract is that mortgage contingency. And as Lisa said, the bank has to do an appraisal, and that happens after you're in contract. And if you have to get your mortgage based on the appraisal, your bank is going to give you your mortgage based on the value of the property. So that you always want to make sure that there is some type of appraisal, or you understand the implications of having an appraisal contingency or no appraisal contingency in your contract of sale. And those are kind of the terms that are being negotiated. Closing dates are being negotiated as well. A lot of people are buying and selling because all of their equity is in their house. So they may be buying and selling at the time. So closing dates. People are going into contract now. They want to close before the end of the year. Realistically, I'm telling clients, we're already halfway through November, towards the end of November. Closing in 60 days or less is really tight. You probably are looking more in 2021. So you have to take that into consideration in regard to timing wise, making sure the seller is available, you're going to be available, and whether you have leasing issues or things like that. Most inspections are happening now. Before, in the beginning of the COVID situation, they weren't doing inspections, so we would try to put in some type of inspection contingency after you go into contract. But now you do your inspections all the time prior to going into contract. They've been allowed to go into properties and do a full inspection. Due diligence. So I think the next slide, we talk about kind of the things that we do in regard to if you're buying a condo or a house. So it's typically you put in your offer. As your attorney, we have to do due diligence if it's a condo or a co-op. And that takes roughly about a week. We always want to make sure that you're buying into a sound building. So we're looking at the financials. We're looking at if there's been litigation, if there's been foreclosures, if there's been any issues with unit owners being in arrears because of what's been happening lately with COVID, people losing their their income. So all of that is part of our due diligence, and that takes about a week. If you're looking at houses, really the between signing the contract is just going to be your inspection and making sure all of the terms in the contract of sale are in line with what you're doing, especially that mortgage contingency. It's typically around 30 to 45 days for you to get your mortgage. I've had several clients this week where we had to extend that time period because the banks are still kind of like backlogged. Appraisals are taking a little bit longer, and just the underwriting as well. So we have to make sure that we extend that time period to get your mortgage. So you have a right to cancel if you're not able to get the mortgage, and you get the return of your down payment.
But even after you get all of that, because the three of us have a deal together, and Sarah, the co-op board, told us 60 days after we even get off the mortgage commitment and her board package and everything in. So it's not only we got through all the financing part and did everything else, now we have another 60 days to wait on top of all of that. And she was hoping to move, she told her landlord December, and now it's going to probably be end of January or February. Somebody in here asked about being a dual agent. Yes, you can be a dual agent. I would say you see less and less of that in modern times. Like when I was started this 15 years ago, yes, you wanted the buyer to come directly to you, but really you're doing yourself a disservice. The agent's doing themselves a disservice, the seller and the buyer, because if I was representing the seller, there's just things I cannot say to the buyer to get them to cross the finish line, to get them the information to help the deal move along. And so I totally value and respect working with another agent. And that's why it's important, I think, that sellers just are understanding what that means in today's world, and that they are willing to pay the fees that are associated with having two brokers on the deal, because you need both people coaching the seller and the buyer to get them across the finish line. There's no way two ways about it. If I'm representing the seller and a buyer works in, I'm just not going to be able to manage and talk to the buyer in the way that I would if I was representing them. So I can be a dual agent. I'm going to have a really hard time wearing those two hats, to just address that one question. If there's other questions, just go ahead, keep putting them in the chat. I like these questions. You guys are asking great questions.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on the agent, like the realtor is getting paid by the seller. So even if you have your own buyer's agent, don't worry that you have to pay that agent a fee. That's going to be coming out of the commission. So
the seller
it doesn't hurt you.
The seller pays the buyer's broker and the seller's broker. So it doesn't hurt you to have a buyer's agent, and it's in your best interest to have one. And I always forget to do that self pitch about it costs nothing to have a buyer's agent. And it's every advantage for you to have it. Do you guys have, in the offer leases that I put in upstate, I did to get to that high number, I put in something called an escalation clause. And it's something that happens upstate that I was not aware of. And I'm wondering if it happens in New Jersey. Do either of you dealt with escalation clauses?
Not in New Jersey. That may be something.
It doesn't happen here in the city either. It was that I offered to go $15,000 over the highest offer that they had, and then I had a clause up to a maximum amount. So the ceiling was I would go $15,000 over the highest offer up to $600,000. And that so that I would be like the always highest bid up to the $600,000. And that escalation clause, it is never. I mean, that we don't do that here. This just doesn't happen here. So it happens in Delaware County though, and Ulster County and upstate. The market up there is just crazy, just so crazy.
So a few things about underwriting and actually bringing up that co-op deal. So when you're talking to mortgage professionals, it's really, really important that you get a good idea of what their turn times are, because turn times is basically how long once a processor or a loan officer submits the loan to underwriting, does it stay in the underwriter's line until it's reviewed? Because that's going to give you an idea of how long it's going to take you to get that mortgage commitment. I'm really proud of my team and just my company because we move like really, really fast. Even with the volume that we have, but like some of the big banks, you're looking at like 3 weeks before an underwriter even looks at your file. So this is really important as you're like working with Rashidah or somebody else talking about negotiating a closing date, because you need to make sure that you have a mortgage company that's going to be able to get this done, when it needs to get done, both giving you the commitment and getting you the clear to close. It's also really important for both the mortgage, really for all three people that you used on your team, that they know how to do co-ops if you decide to get to buy a co-op, because a co-op is a totally different kettle of fish. There's a lot of people involved in a co-op. There's the co-op attorney, there's the co-op board, there's the bank attorney, there's the there's just a lot of people. And it works out great if everyone is very good at their job. And if someone is not good at their job, it does not work out well. So, and on the mortgage end, if you're looking, to put it in a loan application for a co-op, and the mortgage officer is trying to push you to lock, that is a horrible idea. take into account the deal that I have with Victoria Rashidah, borrower, super cool girl, really great. And she, you know, wanted to look into locking. And I said, we can't really lock you in until we know when you're going to get that board interview. Because once you lock in a rate, you're on a time clock and you have to close that deal before the rate expires, or you have to pay an extension fee, and they can get really expensive really fast. And thank God we didn't, because then she finds out that, you know, it's going to take 60 days, which is your typical time for a lock, to get a board interview. So these are just the kind of things that, like, as you're talking to people and figuring out who you're going to work with and what you're really looking for, like, you know, these are sort of the, I think, good questions to ask and good things to keep in mind. Someone was asking about the appraisal prices are lowering lately. Yes and no. So appraisers are as busy as everybody else. So some appraisers have actually increased their price a little bit just due to the volume. And for example, if you go into contract on a 45-day closing, we're probably going to order that appraisal as a rush, because we need to get it back so that we can move along with your deal. But what I mentioned earlier is sometimes you can get, this is something via COVID, you can get what's called an appraisal waiver. It doesn't happen a lot with purchases, it's more with refinances, but it is something that sometimes happens. You don't know until it becomes a live deal and we do our underwriting system in the computer. So it's nothing that you should, you know, bank on getting, but when you do get it, you know, it saves you some money, which is great. When appraisals do come in, there's always like a little room for negotiation. So sometimes, like with Victoria's deal, the appraisal came in higher, which is awesome, because that means that the borrower can actually lower the loan amount, which is amazing. Sometimes if it comes in lower, we can go back to the appraiser and sort of argue why we think it should increase in volume, in price.
Blake, I'm going to get to your question in 1 second, but Lisa, I always, you know, what's your like rule of thumb on locking? Because people always ask me, and I'm always like, ask the mortgage broker, ask Lisa.
Yeah,
because
I know,
I just don't have.
I know.
Is there like, you should be locking once you get your mortgage commitment? Are you like, what, once you're in contract, like what's the rule for co-ops? It sounds like you don't want to lock until you get your board interview. But if the rates are so good and the Fed's talking about raising, you know, where's the line there for paying?
Right. It's so that's like everyone always wants to know, and they want to know, well, do you know if rates are going to get higher or lower? And I'm like, I wish I knew, but no one knows what's going to happen with rates. What I can say is a few things. Everyone, of course, always wants the lowest rate possible, but you also need to keep in mind that if you're talking about difference between like a loan that I was talking to a borrower about today, a purchase between 2.875 and 2.75, which these are like amazing rates. The difference in the payment on this loan amount was going to be $35. Okay. If we lock it too early and she has to extend, the cost of the extension is a difference. That's like over a year of just paying $35 extra a month. Mm-hmm. So I think what you need to do is, I always also tell people, I'll lock you whenever you want, but I just want you to be aware of the concerns that I have if we lock too early. I think this is a really good example of why you need to work with someone that you're comfortable with and someone that you trust, because they're going to give you, you know, my job is to, you know, get you the best rate and, you know, get you locked and get you closed.
Right. And to fix those numbers for you, which is so important. Yeah, exactly. Can you release your lock?
So what I do have a deal that was a refinance that we locked, and it's a SEMA, so it's a little more complicated. It didn't come in time. You can break your lock, but if you break it, you have to wait. At least at our bank, and every bank is different. You have to wait 30 days before you relock. Okay. Wow. So it slows everything down. So
your seller might kill you if you're a buyer.
Yeah. But on the other hand, if you have a purchase, like just to give you one other example, and I'm sure I'm totally confusing you guys, but if you have a purchase and the rates are great, and everything looks great. It's not a co-op, it's a condo, or it's a single family home, and I can lock you in for 60 days at a great rate. I mean, I can get you closed in 60 days if the application is great, if you're on top of getting me what I need, if the contract is all filled, so
As
there
long
are
as
a
you're
lot
not
of
in new
options
construction
available.
waiting for them to get their C of O.
Exactly.
Like
Or
our other
waiting,
deal.
or another issue is, and this is where Rashidah will totally understand, making sure title is clear. Because I can be all good on my end, and if the seller has a violation that he's never paid, that has to get resolved before you close.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a dance, and you just sort of gotta trust your team and know that like we're gonna do right by you, but you gotta be patient on some of these factors out of our control.
Yeah. So that leads me. So as Lisa's just talking about trusting your team and, having a good team, Blake's asking about in terms of inventory, or there's going to be more inventory, but his broker's only sending him things that he can find himself. And I think I said early on in this is that your broker's job is not to find you the thing that is available to everybody on Street Easy. Those needles in the haystack anymore. The internet has changed brokerage. Like that just doesn't happen. You need a buyer's broker to coach you through the process, to give you the advice, to get you the not leave money on the table, to negotiate great terms. Like that's what you need a broker for. They're not going to send you anything that you can't find yourself on Street Easy, Zillow. Those are all public sites. So that's not their job to find you something different. So I hope I answered that question. Then somebody's asking again about assembling your team and the cost of doing that in the beginning. So for me, it's just a conversation. We talk about, I don't get paid until you actually buy something, probably in 6 months. So we work together. We talk, I go out on showings with you. I give you access to my library of resources. I answer your questions at 3 a.m. And then when you finally find the property and then you get into mortgage, and then at the end of the day, I get paid at the end of the roller coaster ride where they stop the car and we depart and they take off the safety belt. Lisa, also, you only start collecting monies once somebody actually finds the property and applies for their mortgage, right? Then there's fees associated.
I don't get paid at
Not
all.
you get it paid. What are
Yeah.
they want to know,
only
like the
money
upfront costs, like
the only upfront cost that is paid prior to closing is typically the appraiser. So the appraiser has to get paid after the appraiser completes his job. So typically, you give a credit card number so that can be charged for the appraiser. All other closing costs are collected at closing.
Yeah.
So you're not paying for anything else until the deal closes.
And same for you, right, Rashidah? You get paid at closing. Yep. So to assemble your team, it costs you nothing.
Well, we take a retainer in the beginning and then the balance gets paid at closing
at contract signing though, right? Usually.
Yeah. Contract signing, the client has to put down a retainer and then the balance gets paid at closing. The majority.
So, but that's after they've already found the property and gone through the whole other process. So assembling your team should cost you nothing, but your time and energy to do your research and talk to these people and make sure you like them and you trust them and you're going to be able to take advice from them. That's something else, Blake, when you're thinking about who you've picked as your buyer's broker, is that you want to feel like these people are knowledgeable, they answer your questions, and that you're going to be able to listen to them when they're telling you, there's some red flags here. Maybe we should do a little bit more digging, or like, maybe we're looking outside of your budget, that this is a stretch and you're just not going to be able to get there. Actually listening to the people that you've, hired to work with you. These are jobs. Like you want to interview them and make sure that this is the person you want to work with. You're going to be spending a lot of time talking to me and Lisa and Rashidah. And so you better like us, or else it's going to make the process a lot harder for you in an already challenging emotional roller coaster way. So having people that you like and trust is super important for anything you do in this world, honestly. There's lots of great questions. So, okay, how do you ensure that the title is clear? Does the mortgage broker provide that insurance?
So the mortgage broker doesn't supply the title insurance. So title insurance is a separate company, third party. Your attorney normally is the one that will coordinate with the title company to do the search. So your attorney hires, contacts the title company and have them do the search on the premises. Title typically takes roughly around 2 to 3 weeks to get a full report done, because with COVID-19, some of the municipalities are backed up. They'll have limited staff, and the title companies actually send in examiners to make sure that there's no judgments, no liens, no mortgages. If they are, they have to discover all of that. And that's all in recorded documents. And easements, those are things that have to come with violations. So that's why it takes roughly between 2 weeks. It can sometimes happen less than that. If you're looking in Long Island, if you're looking in Suffolk, Nassau County, they're already with the title. They're taking at least a month to come in with the title report because they're limited with the municipalities. If you're looking, but generally your title takes roughly around 2 weeks to 2 to 3 weeks to come in. And your attorney is the one that's responsible to reviewing that title report to make sure there's any title issues, notifying the seller's attorney to get that cleared up, and working with the title company and the seller's attorney to clear up some issues. I'll give a kind of a horror story. I'm representing a buyer. We ordered the title as soon as we got into contract. I got the report. I sent out my letter to the attorney specifically saying these are the items that need to get cleared up. I'm CC'd on the emails between the title company and the seller's attorney on this is what is open, this is what we need to get cleared up. It's a prior owner issue. Do you have the policy from when they bought the property? And I'm following up with the attorney. Did you get the title company their documentation? Now we have the bank clearance. We're ready to close. I'm following up with the attorney. Did you clear up the issues with the title company? No response. A couple of days before the closing, I'm emailing the title company. Did you hear from the seller's attorney? Did they clear up the issues? Of course, they did not. So 2 days before the closing, we have to adjourn it because it's a major title issue, and their seller's attorney, who was having a paralegal handle the work and wasn't actually looking at the file, which is another thing about you need an attorney that's actually going to be looking at your file and not handing it off to some third person that's not looking at the file for you, which can delay your closing as a seller or a buyer. And it ended up being a huge issue that they really have. I mean, it took us about 2 weeks for it to get cleared up, but if they had started that process when we had initially told them to, it would have been cleared up in time for closing. And my client had to extend her rate, but of course, because it was their issue, I had the attorney, the seller had to pay for that rate extension. The seller had to pay for the adjournment fees. So all of those are things that you, but the title is a separate, you get a policy, it's an insurance policy. You pay a premium, which is based on your mortgage amount and based on your purchase price. So some of the fees are already set. Unfortunately, in New York, you have mortgage tax, which is a huge part of your closing costs. So we didn't touch on it in earlier, but one of the things that I do with my clients as a buyer, I sit down with you when I'm going over the contract. So before you even sign, I'm going over what your estimated closing costs are going to be. If you have some numbers from your bank, great. If not, I'll give you a general kind of estimate on what I see as customary, but you'll have an idea of what your title, your legal fee, your mortgage, your lender fees are going to be, and also real estate taxes. So you have an idea on what you're going to need for closing, because that's the worst thing to be surprised. Another horror story, I'm representing a seller. Today I get an email from the buyer's attorney. They're in contract. Oh, my client needs to get a seller's concession because they don't have enough money to pay for their closing costs. Shouldn't you have had this conversation with your client before signing the contract? Because now my client doesn't want to give them that concession, and they technically, if they they can potentially lose their down payment. But you want to have conversations regarding your closing costs, regarding title, timing wise, and making sure your attorney is knowledgeable in those aspects of it.
Just to piggyback on that, and that's such a great point, Rashidah. Also, as you're looking at pre-approvals, you should, I always give my borrowers a closing cost worksheet, because there's, as Rashidah just mentioned, there's more than the down payment involved. And particularly if you're looking at a condo or a single or multifamily home, those closing costs can get really high. And it's new to you because this is your first time buying a home. So that's just something to think about and to be requesting. I always make my closing cost worksheet more conservative because a lot of the accurate numbers are going to come from Rashidah, from an attorney and title. But just to give you an idea, and I always want my borrowers to be prepared for worst case scenario. And if the closing costs are less than that, then fantastic. But those are things you definitely need to keep in mind. And if you're looking outside of New York City too, in New Jersey and Westchester, they get pretty expensive pretty quick. So it's just something to think about.
And buyers need to be aware, if you're looking at new construction, of transfer taxes, and that new developments have transfer taxes that you are not necessarily calculating in, and that's in some places, if they are really want to negotiate, are going to be covering right now. But in a lot of these new developments that I am putting offers in, is that they are still expecting the buyers to come up with the transfer tax money. So that's like 1.85. What is the number again? I always
1.825% combination.
I was close. 1.825. There you go.
Crazy that I know it offhand.
Yeah. For new developments. So that's adding a large number. If you're looking at $500,000, it's an extra 10 grand of costs associated with your your purchase and your closing costs that you need to either negotiate in or try to get a credit of some sort. Because if you were not calculating having, okay, I'm only putting 10% down, so I only have 50,000, but I have only $70,000 in the bank, having only $20,000 for closing costs might be cutting it close, especially if the bank wants you to have some money left in your bank account at closing. And for co-ops, the co-op definitely wants you to have money left in your bank account. So if you're looking at 20% down and that's all you have is the 20% down, you really need to budget for closing costs. So looking at things that are outside of your budget purchase wise, and not calculating in just the down payment and not the actual closing costs can really be a disservice. So that's why we say assemble your team. The internet is a clickbait trap that will take you down a path that can be very, very confusing about what you can actually afford if you're just looking at how much you have for a down payment and not calculating in your closing costs. Other question, somebody asked about buying in the spring. In a normal world, buying in the spring is when most sellers put inventory on the market, because New York is the best in the spring for a lot of us, to some people's opinion. So it's not the winter time, but there is a lot of inventory in very specific neighborhoods right now. And I would say that it just depends on where you're looking. Right now, I have a lot of buyers in the Bushwick, Bed-Stuy new construction market. And we went and saw the last 2 weekends, 7 apartments on each Sunday. And there's just a lot of options under 600,000 for 1 bedrooms and studios for that price point in those neighborhoods. So you're worried about inventory, I would say it again comes to where you're looking, what neighborhood and what kind of product you're looking for. And is it in the market now? Are people selling that product right this moment? Because they're looking to capitalize. Like I feel like investors that own condos are liquidating things because they feel like, okay, the rental market's not there anymore. They don't want to have the risk of carrying a property. They're liquidating some condos, but the other sellers are people that are realizing that they have something everybody else wants, like a gigantic outdoor space, 1,000 square with views and totally rent that there's buyers in the market for that right now. I also feel like the buyers in this market right now, and you guys can tell us because you're the buyers, but most people are really looking for turnkey properties. They don't want to come in and do a bunch of work. They want the property to be done. So the places that need work, like need a new kitchen or bath or renovating, people seem to just be going for the shiny new, already done, like they just get to move into their nice new apartment. But that's what I'm seeing in the market. Somebody is asking, thoughts on purchasing land first and then building a home. So in New York, and I think the whole country, you can't finance land. You have to buy the land all cash. You can't get a mortgage for land. So if you can afford to just buy the land, then you might be able to get a construction loan, Lisa, right, to do the actual building of the house after you own the property, or how would that work?
Yeah, you can do a construction loan. With COVID right now, some places aren't doing them. So if you decide to go that route before you buy the land, if you want to, break ground and start building a home right away, you should definitely make sure that you have a lender who can do a construction loan like now. Just to protect yourself. But it is definitely like a complicated process because you're financing building a home. So, it's not for the faint of heart. In terms of if you're a first-time home buyer, I don't usually recommend it unless you have experience in the construction business, because you're going to have to get permits and plans, and I mean, the bank's basically approving the building of the house because they're financing it. So it is definitely a long process. You're on mute, Victoria.
I realized that as I started talking. So I'm going to go. I think we're almost at the end here. These have been really great questions. Yep, we're at the end. Is there any questions, Samantha, that we missed? Because there was a lot. I can try to scroll back through, but there was a lot of great questions, and I think we went on some tangents there. But if anybody still has questions, you can put them in the chat. Student loans, we talked about that, and prices in Brooklyn and the income. Oh, wait, 2 new messages. Let's see. Did we cover clear title? We kind of did that in the
Yeah,
that was the title.
Yeah.
Your attorney.
Yeah. Do we talk about PMI at all, Lisa? Is that still happening?
Not really, but I mean, I think just in a nutshell, I would say that if you want to buy something, but you don't want to put 20% down, there are a fair amount of options. One thing I should mention is that while rates are low right now, private mortgage insurance is really low right now too. It's a very good deal. So, the one thing you need to remember is if you go FHA, that mortgage insurance is always on there. You have to refinance to get out of that mortgage insurance. If you go conventional with PMI, with private mortgage insurance, that comes off once the value appraises, a little under 80% of the loan amount. So I think that's, again, another great conversation for you to have with a mortgage professional in terms of, what you're looking for, and if, under 20% is an option if you want to go that route.
Well, thanks. I always think that's important because I know a lot of people right now are trying to scrape their pennies together to do FHA. Somebody's asking if you can qualify for FHA on a second home.
You can, but there are restrictions based on where it is. So you cannot do FHA for an investment property. And if it's sort of a conversation you need to have depending on what you own now, whether it's FHA or it's not FHA. So it's definitely a conversation to have. FHA is definitely, they will check if it's an investment property or not. So you need to be upfront with your mortgage professional of what you really want to do with that property.
If anybody wants to talk to any of us after this, we can set up a phone call to talk about your specific situation for any part of this. If you want to talk to a lawyer or mortgage broker or real estate broker more for your specific scenario, I'm available. And I know Lisa and Rashidah will make themselves available to talk to you and at no cost, like we have already said, at no cost. It's just a conversation to see if this is, we can help you on this journey. And then if it's a good match for us to work together moving on in the future. So it is 5:03 and we've been talking about real estate for an hour. Not surprising. Monique said she would love to talk more. So great, Monique. I'm happy to reach out to you and we can set something up with Lisa and Rashidah as well. And I really I really so appreciate when people have such great questions and communication. It always makes the class so much more engaging and fun for us when people ask good questions. So thank you, everybody. Lisa, Rashidah, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Everybody have a great night. Stay warm and talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye.